All right. Well, this week we are going to talk about the moment when we become, and I'm pointing my finger in the air to those of you who cannot see me, when we become His. I'm going to start off in a strange place, though. I'm going to start off with the book of Ruth. Some call it Ruth. That is very wrong. Her name was Ruth. Chapter 3, verse 9. Now, if you don't know the story, there was a family who left Israel and went to Moab, which is against God's law. The two sons married while they were there. They both died. The father died, and all that was left was the mother and the two daughter-in-laws. One daughter-in-law went back to Moab to be with her people, and the other daughter refused to go back to Moab. And she, her mother-in-law said, well, go back to your people. And she said, no, wait a minute. Your people are my people, and your God is my God. Now, I know that the Bible was translated very wrong in English, because it always says your God will be my God, and your people will. No, she said your God is my God, and your people are my people. So I hate that that's gotten so wrong, but it is what it is. So anyway, she goes back to Israel with her mother-in-law, and she goes out and starts gleaning a field, which was a thing because of God's law. People would plant their field, and they would plant beyond their field, and then they would only harvest a part of the field and then leave all of the outer edges, all the leftover for the poor people. The poor will always be among us. Some really wise man said that somewhere. But anyway, she was out there gleaning in the field, and she had caught the eye of the man who owned the field, very wealthy man, a little bit older than her apparently. And her mother-in-law encouraged her to, see if you can start up a little bit of a relationship with this guy. He's right up your alley. So after the harvest, during the harvest, you cannot, if you leave anything in the field, you have to let the poor people have it. So what the people did back then was they would harvest the field all day long, and then they would camp out at night in the field. And if you say you're harvesting hay or something like that, you may lean against the hay and sleep. You couldn't leave the field without it belonging to the poor people. So if you wanted to actually, because if you had large crops, hundreds, thousands of acres, whatever, that you want to make money off that. That's why you've spent a lot of money on the seed and on the upkeep and the growing and now in the harvest. And so you don't want to give it away. So what do? Well, your way around that is to stay in the field, because as long as you're in the field, you haven't left, because the rule is if you leave, then everything goes to the poor. So that's why these people were spending the night in the field. So during that night, this woman just kind of snuck up on this older gentleman and laid down beside him. Well, he was sound asleep when it happened. And maybe she moved, or maybe when she, leaned against him or something, it woke him up. And so he turned to her and he said, Miat, who you? In Hebrew, you don't say, who are you? You just say, who you? That's who are you is an English thing. It's not, R is truly not necessary. But anyway, again, we're looking at root 3, when I say 3:9, yeah, 3:9. So it says Vayomer, which is, and he said, then he said, Miat, who you? Vatomer, and she said, me. No, that's not what she said. She said, Anochi, me, or myself or I. You can use any of those three words for Anochi. Root. We would say, I'm Root, well, they didn't have the apostrophe, I apostrophe M back in those days. So I root or me root. And then she said, Amateja, your handmaid, your female slave. It's also used of somebody. It's like we say sir or ma'am to somebody. It's that same that word is used in that way. It's like saying I'm root, sir. Um, that's it's exactly what that's like. It's from the idea of that person being greater than you showing humiliation or not humiliation, humiliation, humility. That was the word I was trying to find. So anyway, so she says, I am root, your handmaid, or I am root, sir. You could look at it either way. Then she said, Ufarasta. Oh, okay. This is to break into pieces. Uh, it's like somebody breaking bread with the purpose of it's breaking it into pieces. Is to expand, to spread out. Like if you're working with dough, you're breaking it and you're putting it together and you're smushing it all out. You've seen somebody do that. I have. Not only on TV though. Well, I guess I've seen my wife do that with a pie once or twice, or maybe a lot more than that. Anyway, that's the idea of the break. That's where the spreading begins to come in to play in this idea to breaking things up, to arrange them in order or something like that. But it's more of the idea of, say, taking a cloth or a blanket or something and spreading it out on the ground. You see how it's the kind of that same motion of the pushing out the dough. But that, that's the idea here. So she says spread. Spread's a really good way to put it because the idea of breaking is just kind of one of those offshoot things. Should not really be applied here. Then it says chenafha. Wow. That's from the root kanaf. It's a wing, so called from its covering. Poetically, it is, they say, the wings of the wind or the wings of the morning. And they do that because it's from the idea of wings flapping very, very quickly. And so the winds move on very quickly. The morning moves on very quickly. So it's used that way poetically all over the Bible, not just in some place like you think of Psalms or something like that, but that's actually used quite a bit throughout the Bible. It's often used metaphorically of care and protection. It's of the edge or the extremity of a garment. And then they say the skirt, which I think for guys anyway, maybe not for women. Well, the younger women maybe today. When I was young, all girls sewed. They all learned to sew either from their mothers, or if they didn't learn it from their mothers, they learned in school. Everyone did that. And so when somebody talked about the skirt of a garment, women would know what that meant. To a guy, a skirt's something a woman wears, right? Or a kilt is often called a skirt. None of that applies. The mantle, they call it sometimes. Let's see, where are we? Are we close up where we can see this? This is the skirt of the mantle. This thing here. This is the edge, the absolute skirt is the edge from which the tzitzit hang, right? So before I move on, I wanted to pull something else up. It's found in Malachi chapter 4, verse 2. Some of you already know exactly what it's going to say. This is a New American Standard. It was still laying around. I couldn't find my Jewish study Bible. But anyway, it's a good translation. But for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in its kanaf, in its skirt, the corner of his mantle, healing right here. This is the same word. And you will go forth and skip about like calves from the stall. I don't know if I agree with that too terribly much. It's not exactly wrong, but it's not about skipping and going forth. It's about being well fed, being a fatted cow instead of just one out in the field picking whatever gleanings it can get its mouth on, right? So we have this idea, what she's saying, she's talking about this thing right here. Now, it would have looked different in those days. It was more like the poncho back then, just kind of a hole cut out. It was, instead of wrapping around the shoulders, the hole was cut out and you just pulled it over. Because this is a long time ago and they started off that way and then it switched to this at some point. I'm not even sure when. But anyway, this is far enough back that it would have been something like that. Well, why would she say that? Well, he's laying under that. That's the reason why they carried those, was so that at night when it got colder, they had a blanket. So this word could also be thought of as a blanket. There's a note here in Jacinius that says, from the Orientals having been accustomed at night, I just said that, to wrap themselves in their mantles, this thing here, although, like I said, it was different at the time. This expression is used for the edge of a bed covering. And then they quote Ruth chapter 3, verse 9. Just happens to be where we are right now. But it goes on to say, spread thy coverlet over thy handmaid. But after that's more interesting. It says, i.e., which means in other words, take me to thy couch as thy wife. So Ruth just popped the question. She just asked this man she barely even knows, doesn't really know him. She's had a very limited interaction with him, and she's just asking him to marry her. But back then, marriage was a little bit different. And just so that you guys know, this is what I'm about to say. It maybe is for a more mature audience. If there's anyone under 12, you've got seconds now to get them out of the room or turn the volume off just for a couple of minutes. I don't know. This literally means that she's asking him to have sex. To take someone for their bride in this time was when they were engaged, if you will, they would put a veil over their face, and that meant restricted access, hands off, leave this woman alone, she's spoken for. But when they entered into the second phase of the marriage, that's when the veil is removed. Access is no longer denied, and you know what comes next. I'm being as delicate as I can here. They literally had sex. That's the point. That's what you should get from this. Oh, what about premarital sex, Rob? Well, Ruth was a widow. This man was an older man. Would assume that he was either a widower himself or he was of a very mature age. So, biblically speaking, this is not a problem. I know that because of especially the effect of the Puritans, that the effect they had uh, even on the Jews, prudishness has really come a long way. But you're not talking about a virgin here. You're not talking about a young couple. This is a mature couple, and what's going on between them here is for mature couples. Let me put it that way. So she says, spread your skirt or your blanket over me. And then it says, Al amat ha, over your handmaid. Then it says, Ki goel ata, for you're the goel. Uh, you're the redeemer. That's what it means. It's to redeem. To buy back as a field or a farm sold, a thing consecrated to God, a slave, redeemer, very frequently used of God as redeeming men, and especially Israel, as out of the slavery of Egypt, for instance. Other, and of course, other dispersions, they go on to say, near of kin, near relative. The right of redemption and the office of avenging bloodshed belongs, according to the Hebrew Bible, to the nearest kinsman, to the nearest relative. And then, of course, Boaz says to her before he covers her with his blanket, and that's a Hebrew idiom. I hope you're still with me on that, what that means. He says, well, okay, but if there's a closer relative and he's willing, he's the one that's going to have to take you as your wife. But if he doesn't want you, I'll certainly take you. So this is mature people doing mature things. And this is all leading up to is something that I find incredible. We're going to move over now to Ezekiel, chapter 16, verse 8. It basically says, and I think this might be the King James version. I don't know. It says, I didn't write it where I got it, so I don't know if I translated it. I doubt it, because I don't usually translate at this point. I'm usually borrowing from somebody, and it's usually the King James, just something simple. Or it could be the Jewish Study Bible. It may have been that one. I don't know. It says, now when I passed over you and looked upon you, behold, this is God talking, by the way. Your time was the time of love, and I spread my skirt over you and covered your nakedness. Are you getting the picture from Ruth here? Covered your nakedness. Yea, I swore to you and entered into a covenant with you, says Yahweh, and you became mine. Are powerful words. And of course, it starts off with Kenathi, the word that's from the root kanaf. This thing. Are you getting the picture here? Do you wonder why the preachers and the rabbin talk about the relationship between God's people and God as a marital relationship? And the indication isn't just that you're engaged, it's that you've reached the second phase of the marriage and you've entered into, let's call it, the intimate phase. Now, you know with God that sex is not going to have anything to do with it. If you're going to some congregation where that's going on, you need to get out of that. That's, oh my goodness. But the indication here is it's more about the veil being lifted and access no longer being denied. Think about when the children of Israel were in the wilderness. Access was very limited, and there was only one person wearing the veil, if you think about it. Moshe had to wear the veil. He wore it when he was around the people, and when he went in behind the curtain, he took the veil off. So, in those times behind the curtain, this is him having a face to face, one on one relationship with God Almighty. Uh, and for those who say that Moshe didn't get to go into the promised land because of the evil thing that he did, what kind of punishment is that? What would that promised land have meant to the man who spent his days in the presence of God? What would, how could he possibly have cared? Anyway, I don't think it was a punishment, but maybe. If it was, it wasn't much of one. So it starts off with the corner of that garment, with the kanaf. And then we move to our next word in secession here is Yoshev, he that dwells. It's to sit down. Also to be seated, to be sitting. It's of habitations. It's of a throne, set of people who sit on a throne. Uh, it's of a bed, which would be more about laying down than sitting. It's to remain, to abide. So when you lay down at night to go to sleep, you're dwelling in your bed, right? So that's why the idea of dwelling comes along, because it's of time being spent somewhere. So if you live in a house and you spend a lot of your time in that house, they say that's where you dwell. Uh, if you think about all the awful things going on around you all the time, then you're dwelling on it, right? If you think about the Torah and the law of God all the time, then that's what you dwell on in your mind. I'm sure you follow that. It's where you live, it's where you occupy your time, it's where you reside, both physical and mental. So this is dwelling. It starts off with the wing and then it goes to the dwelling, because remember in Hebrew, sentences are in a different order. The words are in a different order, the proper order, where English, we do everything backwards. So, where would you dwell? Veseter. Oh, that's of hiding. That's something secret, something clandestine, concealed, hidden, especially a veil, a covering, a curtain. It's even a protection and defense, because you're hiding behind the stone wall so that the enemy doesn't get to you, that sort of a thing. But it's a hidden place. So he that dwells in the hidden place, in this hidden place, God wears one of these. Where do you think we got the idea? Just saying. That hidden place. Then it says Elyon. You guys remember that Amy Grant song from back in the, how far back does that go? I think that goes all the way back to the 70s. El Shaddai, El Shaddai. Blah, 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 blah. One of the things she says in there is El Elyon, God Most High. Elyon. This is the same word. So you knew Hebrew way back when. You didn't know it. Start stuttering there. The secret place of what is the highest, what is supreme, the most high. And of course, in the Bible, it's used of God. Not always, though. It's a generic word because if you have a king, he's the most high in your kingdom, right? If you have a president, he's the most high in your country. Um, he may not be running things for real. Maybe there's some clandestine group behind him actually calling the shots, but he's literally the most high. He should be the one in charge. But maybe it's not that way. Maybe it is. Not really into conspiracy theories. Don't really know how all that works. But for those of you who are, think of it that way. The secret place of the most high. And then it says, Betzel, under the shadow. Under the shadow. So if you think of what a Sukkot is, a sukkah, that's a covering. A sukkah is a covering. It is. It can be anything from standing under the canopy of a tree to get away from the hot sun to get some shade on you. That would be, if you will, the secret place of not exactly the Most High because it's a tree, but it covers you. It shields you from the sun, right? So it can be, you can have a little 4x4 porch with a topper on it, and that's a sukkah. There's not just one. There's not the one that you just build one time a year and put in your backyard and have a single meal either in it or by it and call it all holy and stuff. No, that a sukkah is used of a lot of things. This thing right here can and often is a sukkah, especially in the biblical time. If it was raining, they'd probably pull the thing over their head. Yeah, some protection, not a lot probably. If it's the sun's just baking you and you don't have a kippah, you don't have a hat to wear because they didn't have these back then, pull the thing over you. If you're in prayer, the Bible teaches us, pull this thing over us when we pray. And if you're, I mean, it could be just about anything. Your house can be a sukkah, right? It's a permanent one, but it's a sukkah. It permanent in that, you're not pulling it around or tearing it down, folding up, putting it in a little package, right? That sort of thing. So you have some stuff coming together here. I'm going to pull it all together here in a little bit. I'm going a little fast today, I think. This under the shadow, Bezel, the shadow, which I've compared to the sukkah because it casts the shadow. Although that word's not used here, I'm just throwing that in for the fun of it. Then it says Shaddai, not Shaddai, it's Shaddai. And they say of the Almighty. Okay, most powerful Almighty. They give that in the Jacinius. Jacinius says it is from the root Shaddad, but this word cannot be conjugated out to Shaddai. That's not possible. That doesn't work. Hebrew doesn't work that way, so it's a mistake. It must be from the root shad, which means breast. I'm just going to say it that way to be delicate, but it's a very particular part of the breast. So some of you will get what I'm saying here. Conjugating shad out to Shaddai makes the meaning my breast. Or breast would be in plural. It's not really plural. In Hebrew, that's dual, not plural. In other words, there's two. It is the picture of someone at the breast. So what are we seeing here? Well, it's like two people embracing each other, but you're covered with this thing. Embracing. It's of a couple. Maybe one of them's just laying the head on the breast. Got that? You getting the idea? I hope. But this goes further than that because it comes from shod, and shod gives you the idea of the giver and sustainer of life, because this is feminine. And yes, God is both masculine and feminine. Uh, you can't get around that. His name is masculine and feminine, and everything that is connected to him in the Bible is always written in the masculine and feminine. They're combined together because you can't talk about God in any other way. So for women who say, God, you can never understand, you're not a woman, well, where do you think you got your feelings and emotions, right? I mean, whatever it is that you think makes you separate from, different from God, no, you got that from God because you were created in his image just as the male was. There's no difference there. I mean, there is a difference, but not in the creation part. One is in the image of one side of God, and one is in the image of the other. And that's exactly what Adam said. This man, he shall be called woman, because everything feminine was taken out of me. That's probably the most accurate translation of what he said that you're ever going to hear, because I took it all the way. I didn't just give an overview like so many people do with their translation on that, because it bothers people to think that way. But everything masculine was left in the man when he was separated out into two beings, and everything feminine was taken from that man and put in that woman. So if a man has a feminine side, that means he's married. And if a woman has a masculine side, that means she's married to a man, right? Are you following what I'm saying? I, as a man, do not have a feminine side unless I have a woman to be my feminine side. And Donna, my wife, is my feminine side, right? And vice versa. So compare that to God. Now, he has a masculine and a feminine side. That's a good thing for humankind, because if it was all masculine, testosterone driven, he would have wiped us all out a long time ago. He has that feminine side. It was like, oh, it's okay, little baby. It'll be all right. He has that nurturing side, scientifically proven that women have the nurturing side that men do not have. There exceptions to the rule? Yes. But the design is not intended to be that way. It's part of the design if it is that way, but that's not the fundamental design in and of itself. It's like saying that you can't use a screwdriver as a hammer because it was designed to be a screwdriver. Well, how many of you tried to hang a picture and couldn't find a hammer? It took you a little screwdriver. You follow what I'm saying? So yeah, there's always going to be exceptions, but that's not part of the design. Anywho, the giver and the sustainer of life. So it's from the feminine side, it gives the life, it sustains the life. And so this part of God is being completely, it's coming completely from the feminine in this case. And then we go on to our last word is yit lonan, which is to pass the night, to lodge, to turn in order to lodge, to tarry, to dwell, to continue. You get the idea? So this is the word that stretches a word that's already of time out further. So you should be familiar with this, because it's pretty much like what it says. He that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of his breast. That's a better translation. not almighty, all powerful. Yes, he's all those things, but that's not how this word was applied in this sentence. So if you're underneath this thing, this kanaf, this skirt, this edge, this corner where there is healing found, God said, I am Yahweh, and beside me, other than me, there is no salvation. So if there is Mashiach, God is Mashiach, not some child God had with some human being. That's nonsense. God, if a woman had a child and that child was Mashiach, then that child was God being born as a child, not God having a child, God being the child. All right? That really should make people who especially Christians, that should make you real happy. Seems to me like it ought to make a Jew happy too, because it'll sure explain a lot of things that we couldn't explain before. Anyway, so this thing is lifted up just like what Boaz did that night. He had already taken it off. He had laid it over himself. A lot easier to do in the original configuration because it was basically a blanket with a hole in the middle. Oh, there's a draft in here. I guess that's why they went to this, because now when you unfold this, it's more like a blanket without the draft. But anyway, that may actually be the whole reason why it changed. I don't know. Never read anything about it at any time or any place. Just throwing that out there as an idea. But so Boaz was covered with this blanket. He realizes somebody is with him. She pops the question, and he raises the thing. She moves to his chest. He covers over, and what happens, happened. With God, it's different. With God, he has pulled this thing back. We lay our head on his breast, and he covers us back over. So I want to hit one more verse here. What? I want to move on to Psalm 91:4. He shall cover you with his feathers, with his kanaf, and under his wing you will trust. His truth. Yeah, making sure that I'm not missing some boxes falling over. I'm missing part of my screen here. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. So we have Be'ev Rato. This is with his feathers, poetically ascribed to God a wing feather with which birds soar, such as that of the eagle, the dove. It is distinguished from the wing itself. So we've gone from the corner to a single feather, right? Think about it. God's huge, we're teeny tiny, probably only going to have the one feather. Anyway, yes, Yasech is our next word. He shall cover. So he's going to cover, and then of course, lach, he'll cover you with his feather. And to cover, to weave, to interweave, especially branches to make a hedge or to construct a booth, a sukkah. Hence, to edge, or to hedge rather, to fence, as both booths and hedges are made to protect and guard persons and gardens, to protect, to cover over, and to properly indeed used of branches and trees to cover, to hide oneself. So you get protection, you get the covering that was just described in the last verse, and the dwelling, because the booth is where you dwell. That idea is still going to be here, right? Then we go on to Vetahat, Kena 5. Vetahat is the lower part, that which is below, beneath, or under. So you're under what? Kena 5. His wings. His skirt with the healing. Techshe is our next word. You will trust properly to flee. Well, that don't sound like trust. I say that every time. To take refuge, to flee somewhere for refuge. You're going to go there in a hurry. That's the idea here. You're going to flee to this. Why would you flee to God? Because you know that's the one you can trust. You're going to get there in a hurry. You're going to feel to trust in someone, especially in God. It's from the root hush, which is to make haste, to flee with alarm. This root is onomatopoetic, as though imitating the sound of very hasty motion. Move, to agitate, to excite, to speed. Used figuratively of violence, which is not, it's not being used in that way here, but this is it's just not, that's not the connection. Hebrew is a why do I always think of archaic? That is so wrong. Primitive. Hebrew is a primitive language, so you have one word will have a lot of different meanings, and they almost always have an opposite. So if there's a good, there's a bad. Barach, for instance, can mean blessing, but it can also mean cursing, because the opposite of a blessing from God would be a cursing from God. So if you're going to put it into words to where they get the worst kind of blessing, curse, then it's, you say the word barak in the negative so that it's the absolute opposite of a blessing from God. Anyway, Hebrew works that way, and it's good to know. Zina is a shield. It's saying here, it will be your shield. Of a larger kind, covering the whole of a soldier. It's from the root zanan, which is to protect. In other words, where you get the idea of a shield so called from surrounding, in other words, defending. Somehow this is from another root, sahar, which is to surround, as in a tower or fortress. That's your shield, right? That wall can be your shield, the tower, the fortress. Hiding behind a car in a shootout that can be your shield, right? So it's saying that God, of course, is your truth. Amito is his truth. Emet, truth, that's a root. Firmness, stability, perpetuity, faithfulness, fidelity, in which anyone is consistent and performs promises. Uprightness, integrity of mind, especially is used of a judge, having integrity and dispensing his judgments equally, and that sort of a thing. So here's my flowery version of that particular one. I've kind of been skipping over those today, but here's my flowery one from a long time ago. He will interweave his feathers. That's why it said feather and then feathers. Use the one feather, feather then wings, rather. Said that wrong. so that you would get this idea of this interweaving. I brought that up a little bit, didn't really get into it, but it's the interweaving. He will interweave his feathers all around you, creating a hedge to protect you. And under his mantle, remember this thing, the kana, his talit, if you will, his bed covering, you will hastily flee for refuge. And you will enjoy the pleasures of his passion. I kind of danced around that one, so maybe you didn't pick up on that, but that's what it's saying. His firmness, stability, faithfulness, fidelity, righteousness, and integrity will be a shield that covers your whole body. It will surround you like a tower and a fortress. So, how do we get to this place? How much time do I have? Okay. It's like, oh no, I'm running out of time. How do we get to this place where we become his? Well, at this point, it's probably obvious to you. You have to get under this place, right? You have to get your head on his chest. You have to have that intimate relationship. How do you do that? Well, I remember a girl telling me years ago that when she prayed, she's Trinitarian, so when she prayed, she would hold her pillow because that represented God. Sound like an idol to me, but anyway, she would hold her pillow and she would give God, it's like she had a timer or something. She'd give God 5 minutes, and then she'd give the Son 5 minutes, and then she'd give the Holy Ghost 5 minutes. It's the creepiest thing I think I ever heard. And I don't think I told her that, unless I was speaking out loud at the time and not thinking to myself. Actually, I probably did tell her that. Anyway, no. When I talk to God all day long, and I just always no, no. Who had the intimate relationship with God? Moshe. And Moshe took the veil off. He unrestricted the access. And then he entered into the secret place. At that time, that was the secret place. And it should be the example. What did Moshe give to the people? The law. What are the people supposed to follow? The law. Always. There will never be a time where you live by grace in contradiction of the law, because the Bible says that the law is the grace of God. So the way it was translated in the Christian Bible is very wrong. If you're living according to God's law, you are living by grace. If you are not living according to God's law, you are living by the curse. Remember, Moshe and his protege both said it. I've set before you blessing and cursing, life and death. Choose life. They both said it, right? And when did they say it? Right after they read the law. So if we want an intimate relationship with God, if we want to lay our head on God's chest and be covered with his wings, we learn his law, we live according to his law. We don't pick and choose what laws we'll live by and which laws we will not, because God's law is his law. And if you throw away one little law, well, I'll pay my tithe, but I'm not going to wear the ZZO. Forget about it. You've thrown it all away. Because God is either your master. I don't know what else to say. Remember when Ruth said, I'm your handmaiden? She called him Sir. God either is that greater. He either is El Elyon or he's not. And if he's not, you're lost and wandering in the darkness, even if you are going to Sabbath service every Shabbat. Even if you do pay your tithe, but don't wear your seat sealed, or maybe you wear your seat sealed and you don't pay your tithe. There's so many things. Some Jews will tell you there's 613 things. That's a bad count, my friends. Somebody was trying to prove that there was only 613, and it turns out there's a lot more. But that's okay, because yeah, some of them are you could say they're just for the priest, but what do you do when you don't have priests? You probably better learn those so that you can fill that position if you have to. I mean, to some degree, you need to at times. I mean, we have the bread, we have, that sits out. We have the incense that's always burning. We do that because we don't have a temple, but we want to fulfill all of God's law. So we do those things. Do we make sacrifices? Well, of course we do. When you come to Sukkot this year, and I hope everyone comes, because we are having it here. I think I told you guys that. We're going to take some meat and we're going to cook it on the barbecue, and that's a sacrifice. Will it cover your sin? Nope. No, it won't. But it represents the covering of our sin. So we make the sacrifice. Anyway. Can you really, truly, intimately know your spouse if you know nothing about your spouse? If you don't know what makes your spouse tick, if you don't know what's important to your spouse, if you don't know when your spouse is happy or sad or angry, you should know these things, right? Remember when you were courting and you would sit in the driveway until the sun came up, just talking, getting to know each other? That's what learning the Torah is. That's those long nights, talking until the sun comes up. And then there's the marriage ceremony, and then there's the living out the rest of your life, interacting with each other. But without the Torah, it's impossible to know God. It is. The Torah is God's way of life. It is what God thinks. It is what God feels. And if you don't know that, you've not read it. You don't understand it. So you need to learn your spouse, because I promise you, there is nothing your spouse doesn't know about you. Well, I've run out of time. Shalom shalom, y'all.
The blessing, Be'ivrit. Barecha Yahweh Beyish Merecha. Ya'er Yahweh Panai Lecha Vihunecha. Yisa Yahweh Panai Lecha Veyasim Lecha Shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness and favor and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace, because he is your friend. Amen.